Hello, my name is Barbara Foreman, and I'm here with my colleagues Lori Lee and Kevin Smith from the Regional Educational Laboratory Southeast. We are partnering with the South Carolina Department of Education to develop and present some webinars on their multi-tiered system of support plan. This first webinar from us is on database problem solving to promote literacy success. First, we would like to acknowledge our funder, the Institute of Education Sciences in the U.S. Department of Education, and also present this disclaimer that our federally funded contract provides recommendations, but you do not have to follow these recommendations. So first, there is often confusion about what multi-tiered system of support means and how it's the same or different from response to intervention and school-wide positive behavioral support. So this slide tries to define response to intervention on the left-hand side and school-wide positive behavioral interventions and supports on the right side. So first of all, response to intervention came about with the Presidential Commission in 2001, actually research leading up to 2001 and 2, where the IQ achievement gap was challenged as a way to identify students with learning disabilities. And then in 2004, the reauthorization of Individual Disabilities Education Act put response to intervention into that revision as an alternative way to identify students with learning disabilities. So an RTI assessment data is used to improve student outcomes through multiple tiers of evidence-based instruction. School-wide positive behavioral support started from a different tradition. It evolved from applied behavioral analysis, positive behavior support, community health, and implementation science. It applies a formal system of behavioral support at the classroom and school levels. So these two different traditions actually are complementary. One focuses more on the standard protocol for instruction, RTI, and the positive behavioral support focuses more on behavior, obviously, and both behavior and academics go hand in hand. There was a national evaluation of RTI and MTSS by Ballou et al. In 2015, and it revealed, unfortunately, null results or actually some negative results. And Russell Gersten and his team of researchers decided to look more closely at the effectiveness of RTI, and they did a systematic review of over 1,800 studies from 2002 to 2014 that they screened, and they used the What Works Clearinghouse rigorous criteria to winnow that 1,800 down to 43 studies that met the criteria of reading interventions with grade 1 to 3 students who were below the 35th percentile. And out of those 43, 23 met the What Works Clearinghouse rigorous standards for evidence. And what Russell Gersten and his group found was that RTI could be effective with a smaller group size than what Ballou et al. Found in their study. In grade 1, a group size of 3.4 on average, and in grades 2 and 3, a group size of 2.8 was where you found effectiveness in the students. In fact, there were gains of 13 to 17 percentile points in non-word reading and real word reading, and gains of 13 percentile points in reading comprehension. Multi-system tiers of support often use Rob Horner's team-initiated problem-solving model, the TIPS model. And in fact, in South Carolina, this model is used, and it is there's an appendix spelling out the TIPS 2 document. So it starts with problem solving, then it works around to the right to identify the problems and use data and monitor results. So this should be a very familiar problem solving cycle for you. So given problem-solving cycle. What is the problem? So a common problem is that students are not proficient on the grade 3 reading test. So the question then is, what can we do about that? Well, this slide gives you some keys to ensuring grade 3 reading success based on research. First of all, we need to focus on language development in pre-kindergarten. We know that language skills in pre-K predict reading comprehension scores in upper elementary. So the importance of focusing on quality language instruction in pre-K can't be emphasized enough. Then in kindergarten through grade 3 reading instruction, we want to make it evidence-based, explicit, and differentiated. We want to have push in and pull out and even summer interventions that are sufficiently intense to accelerate growth. And of course, we want to assess for risk, strengths, of course, progress, and outcome with reliable and valid measures. Use the data to diagnose and set instructional objectives.
This is Kevin Smith at the REL Southeast. I'm going to talk about a project that we did with the Mississippi Department of Education a few years ago, where we worked with them on some statewide professional development that was focused on Tier 1 instruction for educator outcomes associated with Mississippi's K-3 early literacy professional development. And with that initiative, they trained K-3 teachers statewide. They also trained on a shorter version of the professional development administrators and pre-service teacher faculty. And with this, we created a survey to look at changes in teacher knowledge as they were progressing through the professional development. We also worked to develop an observation tool that coaches could use in classrooms with teachers to look at changes in instructional practice. And again, focusing on Tier 1 instruction to make sure that teachers understood foundational reading skills is a good approach, because you want, of course, your Tier 1 instruction to be as solid as it can so that you have as few students needing intervention as possible.
This is Lori Lee from the REL Southeast. And when we think about student achievement, we want to make sure that our instruction initially is as strong as possible, that Tier 1 instruction that Kevin just spoke about. We want to make sure that as many students as possible are on track from the very beginning. You see on the slide that the correlation of initial achievement to ending achievement is quite high, meaning that the students that start ahead stay ahead, and the students who begin behind stay behind. We do know that students come to us even in kindergarten with deficits in literacy, and so schools don't create the achievement gap, they actually do inherit it. We know that remediation is really not the solution, not for the students, and in regard to finances, we see that it's much more expensive if we have to remediate large percentages of students. If we can ensure that as many students as possible are on track and on grade level from the beginning, it's much better for the students themselves and also for the schools financially. We know that remediation, so how do we help improve our reading instruction? First of all, our teachers need good assessments. They need data from benchmark and normative assessments, and they need to be able to use that data to guide their instruction. They need to ensure that they have direct instructional time with students, that additional time is provided for students that are lagging behind as determined by the data, and that they provide quality instruction in small groups that are fluid and that address skills that are appropriate and needed by those students. And then finally, for those students that are behind, they need to accelerate their growth, meaning that the intensity of instruction needs to be strong and the explicit instruction needs to be provided to ensure that they're making more than 1 year's worth of growth because they are behind. Also, knowledgeable reading specialists are very helpful in providing that instruction. We know that the days are gone when our principals just simply opened the building in the morning. They are truly our instructional leaders. Our administrators need to ensure that they know what good instruction looks like. They need to be in their buildings, walking through classrooms, ensuring that quality literacy instruction is happening. Our literacy coaches need to be involved with their administrators in the building, ensuring that they're providing embedded professional development that will increase the abilities of our teachers to provide quality instruction. The administrators in the building need to be looking for that residue of coaching in those classrooms.
On this slide, you see an example from Kennewick, Washington, of how they calculated the amount of time needed to catch up struggling readers. So they took their outcome data and figured out that each unit of 13 percentile points from the 50th percentile, which of course is average, equals a year of growth. So the state standard in percentiles is the 50th percentile, that's average. They took a student X, in second grade, and his or her status in percentiles was 12th percentile. So then they subtracted the 12th from the 50th, which is average, to get 38 percentile points that student needed to make up. And given that 13 percentile points is what they roughly find in a year of growth, then 38 percentile point difference then divided by 13 gives you 2.9 years of catch-up growth. So then to figure out how many instructional minutes for that student, they did the following calculations. The daily minimum requirement for annual third grade growth was 80 minutes. The daily minimal requirement for annual fourth grade growth was 80 minutes. And an additional daily minutes to make 3 years of additional growth, 2.9, roughly 3 years that student was behind, would then be 3 times 80, so that's 240 minutes. So you add 80 and 240, and you get 400 minutes of instruction are needed in grade 3 and 4 to catch up that second grader. So they divided that over 2 years, so 200 minutes of direct reading instruction in grade 3 and 200 minutes in grade 4 is needed to reach the 50th percentile by the end of grade 4. Now, moving to another example from Connecticut, the work of Michael Coyne in Connecticut gives us some idea of the essential features of multi-tiered system of support in a kindergarten through grade 3 pilot study that he did in low-performing schools in Connecticut. He first found that commitment to K-3 reading as a school's top priority was essential. Then there needed to be a school-wide reading improvement plan with the school literacy achievement team involved. Then there was a need for a comprehensive literacy assessment system to inform decisions about reading instruction or intervention. Obviously, high-quality classroom reading instruction for all students was essential, and evidence-based supplemental intensive reading interventions for students at risk for reading difficulties in Tiers 2 and 3, and then ongoing coaching and targeted professional development to support administrator and teacher knowledge of research practices and systems. And finally, it's important to engage parents. So Michael Coyne had a parent engagement program in the Connecticut work. He found several stumbling blocks in his pilot work with MTSS in Connecticut. The first one was leadership. The problem was that the MTSS plan at the school level didn't guide day-to-day practice. So what's the solution? Representative and empowered literacy team with regular meetings, routines, and communication. A useful and dynamic literacy plan with short and long-term goals, and an activity timeline that documents all school literacy activities with alignment to goals. Another stumbling block was Tier 1. The problem was there simply wasn't consistent high-quality instruction in the classroom. The solution he and his teachers came up with was to adopt a comprehensive published core reading program aligned with standards and program-specific professional development to make sure that core reading program was implemented well. And secondly, teacher-developed templates outlining essential components of the core reading program to guide instruction, ensure consistency, and facilitate coaching, because often the core reading programs are enormous. They might take 2+ hours a day to actually implement. So these templates overlay the program and help to highlight the evidence-based practices that were essential. This next slide shows an example of a lesson plan that Mike Coyne and his teachers developed. This is showing across a week work that might be done in grade 1 classrooms, focusing on some foundational skills. But notice across the top you have the differentiated groups. He had a group that was well below level. He had another group that was English language learners, another group that needed work on oral language, and then an advanced group. So creating these kinds of differentiated lesson plans is really important to make sure that Tier 1 instruction is as good as it can be. Another stumbling block was data use, a very common problem. How do you translate data to meaningful instruction? His solution was to have data team meetings throughout the year to review data and document instructional decisions. And secondly, data workbooks or spreadsheets that compiled all the reading assessment data for a student, including the instructional focus and materials, the grouping and scheduling decisions, and assigned interventionist. And this next slide is an example of a data workbook where they took their data from their statewide testing, early reading testing, and they organized the data to identify student needs and to coordinate instruction and intervention for each group. And another stumbling block was intervention. And the problem was, how do you implement small group intervention? So his solutions were, first of all, a school-wide block schedule that prioritized reading instruction, small group intervention, and for those needing it, small group supplemental intervention in Tier 3. A small number of evidence-based interventions aligned across the tiers of instruction with program-specific professional development, and emphasize their small number, because if you have too many intervention programs going on, you can't possibly provide the professional development needed for each one to be done with fidelity and quality. And then small group templates outlining essential components of each intervention program, including the grouping and the dosage decisions to guide intervention to ensure fidelity and facilitate coaching. It's essential that you have this monitoring to ensure fidelity and ongoing professional development for interventionists to make sure the intervention is as good as it can be. And here is an example of a master academic schedule. And you can see how you can open up slots for intervention by working with the master schedule, and to make sure that you then have enough time to intervene with as many students who need it as possible. Reading can be taught in the afternoon. You may need to move away from just having reading in the morning to accommodate all of the small groups that need an intervention.
A key to successful implementation of intervention is for school leaders to agree to services to make sure there's enough and sufficient intensity and duration to accelerate students' catch-up growth. As we've already heard, it can take quite a bit of time and resources to catch students up. So teachers, coaches, administrators need to work together to make sure that there's enough growth provided, enough time and resources provided so that students can meet grade level proficiency benchmarks. The REL Southeast has developed a literacy roadmap with a lot of links to free literacy products and tools that have been developed in a school improvement framework to help you with many of the points that we've been discussing today.
Here we've listed several additional resources that are available that pertain to RTI and MTSS. We hope that you'll access them and that you will find them to be beneficial to your work. We would like to thank you for joining us for this webinar. You'll see our email addresses are there for you, so if you have questions at all or any comments, please feel free to contact us at any time. We also would encourage you to visit our website. Thank you.
Right, so our school already has RTI meetings, and we already have a problem-solving process in place. Do we have to use the TIPS model, or can we use what we already have in place?
Sure. I just gave the example of Horner's TIPS model because it's in your appendix of your South Carolina multi-tiered system of support document. But actually on page 8 of your document, you have the RTI graphic, which has the database decision-making in the middle, and then it has progress monitoring, multi-tiered prevention system, and screening all around it. And that's fine. That's very good. Very good. So the answer is yes. You can. I assume that's what you're using in the district. What's on page 8? The RTI?
That, and we've broken it down so it's a 4-step process where we collect data, analyze data, look at strengths and possibilities for growth, and create goals and action plans.
Yes, that's fine. It's actually more concise than the TIPS model. I just mentioned TIPS because it's in your appendix, but on page 8, you have the 4-step model that you're talking about in the same document. So the answer is yes.
Good. Okay, along the same vein as the first question, the second question is we do already have RTI meetings in place. So what does an MTSS database problem-solving team look like? What's the change we need to make?
Yeah, I think we have too many team meetings if we're not careful. And as I said in the presentation, it's really great to combine behavior and academics. So having the RTI team involve people who are behavior specialists, not necessarily for all students, but there may be some students where that's a major component. That's disrupting their ability to engage in instruction. So I think it can be combined. That's my personal belief. I don't think these two traditions should stay separate. Then you have too many teams. You have just potentially a lot of redundancy. So that would be my suggestion.
So really we're just expanding, so we're not just looking at the academic piece during these meetings, we're bringing in the social, emotional behavior, and it's all done in one meeting.
Yes, I would recommend it that way. I think we have too many silos in education, often attached to funding streams. The more we can combine the silos to focus on the child, the student, the better off the student will be. So yes, social emotional learning, behavioral issues, very important. A lot of struggling readers, you just can't even get to instruction until you solve some of those issues first. So putting team members together to work on this jointly makes a lot of sense.
Excellent. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Good job, Gloria.
An example of a data workbook where they took their data from their statewide testing, early reading testing, and they organized the data to identify student needs and to coordinate instruction and intervention for each group.
Solution, not for the students. And in regard to finances, we see that it's much more expensive if we have to remediate large percentages of students. If we can ensure that as many students as possible are on track and on grade level from the beginning, it's much better for the students themselves and also for the schools financially.